So welcome to the Sheffield Sunday As Bill Says It meeting. This is a main share meeting, and today it is with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Miss Bitty from Idaho, who's come to share for about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for general share or if you'd like to ask a question. Thanks, Miss Bitty. It's wonderful to have you here, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to set my timer. I thought it was 30 minutes. You said 40, and I thought, oh, God, I'm never going to shut up. So I'll start the timer there. Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, my name is Biddy. I am a recovered alcoholic. My home group is called 8'A on the Rocks. And I'm in Area 18, District 4. It's a little town. It's not that little. Caldwell, Idaho. Kind of on the west coast of the United States, if that means anything to people who are geographically challenged, such as myself. I have a sobriety date of 12/23/2009. I have a sponsor, and I live in the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12, and I'm absolutely all the way in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. All the way in love with that. And I want to thank you for asking me to be here today. This is my favorite topic, and this reading was it's one of two favorite pages. I'm sure as time goes on, I'll develop a love. I love all the pages, but it's one of two favorite pages. The other page that I really like out of As Bill Sees It, and they go together, is page 91, Courage and Prudence. But this particular page in As Bill Sees It comes from a letter that Bill had written to the Grapevine in December 1957, and it's in segment 1. But at any rate, the letter is called The Greatest Gift of All, right? And I came into Alcoholics Anonymous wondering, I don't know, I had gifts wrapped around material items. I had, if you'd have asked me to write a gratitude list, it would have been, it really would have just been all material items. It wouldn't have been anything very, very much deeper than, my pretty shiny horses, or maybe I'm really grateful to live in the mountains, and, that kind of doe-eyed, when they ask Miss America, what would you do? And I want world peace, just something non-substantial. And so Alcoholics Anonymous has kind of changed all that. And really what changed it it is AA, certainly, okay, but it's having been an alcoholic, right? I'm an alcoholic, and today I recognize that would be the number one thing if I were to write gratitude list. I'm not a real big gratitude list person because I write inventory, right? So once I've written inventory, the gratitude list is an automatic byproduct of that. And as it turns out, everything in column 2, all the stuff they did, all the things that happened, that's the gratitude list, because without those things, I would not have any need to grow spiritually. And so, again, the gratitude list is an emergent property. It comes out of opportunity for spiritual growth. So, this letter has some other really beautiful stuff. We were just talking about an episode. I'll call it an episode. Something happened last night at home group. We have this really great thing that happens at my home group. On the first Saturday of every month, we have dinner and a speaker. And it's so much fun. Last night we had lasagna, and our friend, one of our home group members, Rich, he shared his story. And last night we were deluged. 3 treatment centers came. 3 of them. We had, I don't know, we didn't have 100 folks, but I'll bet we had upwards of 80. I think somebody counted 76 souls in there. Most of which may or may not be alcoholic. That's not my gig. But anyway, we had a little difficulty with distinguishing between tradition 3 and tradition 5. And apparently I'm an old timer, and I think that's only because I have gray. I don't I said my sobriety date's, 2009, right? But, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous in 1989. So I have a lot of years of experience in AA. It's not all sober. And this is another one of those things that the things that I thought were so bad in my life have ended up being very, 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 very good indeed. And so, no more bad days. That always comes to me. No more bad days. I have uncomfortable days, of course, but that doesn't automatically mean bad. And I would have told you when I first came in that if I felt bad, I was having a bad day. And if I felt bad and having a bad day, everybody around me was darn sure going to hear it. Okay, because I'll suffer, but I'm not going to suffer alone. So this now is different. And so I came into AA thinking I just wanted to quit drinking. Then I also came in at a time where there was very little in the group I came into, very little attention paid to our 12 traditions. And I couldn't identify at first. I absolutely could not identify. There was a lot of talk of we have a pamphlet. It's called Problems Other Than Alcohol, right? And I couldn't, it's like, well, okay, I don't do that. Oh, and, look for the similarities. I couldn't find any. But there was in that group a small amount of people that were talking about alcoholism, the way it's described in our literature. And so as it turns out, those were the people that really did help me, but I had not yet had. In 1989, I had not yet had a step one experience. And so I wasn't really ready to listen. And as we were talking before the meeting, there's a line in the big book that says we're sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free, right? Happiness, joy, and freedom. But for me, it's not necessarily in that order, because if I pursue happiness, I lose happiness. If I pursue usefulness, right? We have found a way of life that I'm useful in. Happiness becomes a byproduct. The same as my physical sobriety has become a byproduct of living in a useful way in God's kingdom. And, when I do my morning routine, my meditative thing we have in our directions, it's directions in our big book. On awakening, I think about the 24 hours ahead. But before I begin, I ask God to direct my thinking. I don't wake up in untreated alcoholism because 99.9% of the time I've gone to bed with a clear idea of my evening review. And I inquire at the end of that evening review. This is where the whole thing hinges for me. At the end of the evening review, it says this: after making our review, this is step 11, we ask God's forgiveness. Well, that seems kind of cheeky. I think that's a good UK term, right? That seems kind of cheeky. Because the implication there is if I'm asking God's forgiveness, is, I'm being told to ask God's forgiveness, is that I'm going to need it. I must need God's forgiveness every day. And it doesn't mean I show up in my world, the tornado that I once was. But now I'm looking for milder forms of the same defects I walked in the door with. Now I'm looking for improvement, patient improvement. And I like this in the reading. It says that it does go on. We find that bit by bit we can discard the old life. And I want it to be the old life. And the problem with that is if you're here, oh my gosh, I had some old behavior today. No, you didn't. If you had it today, it's current behavior. I didn't have old behavior today. That's impossible. But when I go to bed at night and I ask what corrective measures should be taken, that's right there. I'm asking God. This is all a prayer. I've asked God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. And this is where I adjust my sights. In our sex inventory, we're asked, the sex inventory isn't limited to sex. Okay, it's how I show up in all relationships. And I'm asked to form an ideal. And that ideal isn't about, what the other person is supposed to do. That ideal is how am I going to show up and what am I going to do? And so since I'm not the one in charge of formulating my ideal, that's very much a God thing. When I inquire what corrective measures should be taken, God directs me to God's perfect ideal for me. 100% of the time, it's in direct opposition to what I want. Okay, it's not, because I want to rest on my laurels. Step 10 is such a beautiful, just four little paragraphs, right? Ignore them, There's a YouTube channel called Unintended Consequences, right? Ignore those four little paragraphs in step 10 is specifically the sentence that says it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on my laurels. Well, that's like a warning. It is easy to let up on that. It's easy. Which conversely then means that it might be a little bit difficult not to. And so I inquire what corrective measures should be taken. And so this little thing, I'm bringing this thing with the home group, one particular member that it was really kind of a one-on-one, but there were a couple of people in the peripheral listening to us have this interaction and this disagreement. And it literally took this guy and he's pretty new. So I give him all the kudos, man. He's pretty new. And we both got our adrenaline up. Neither one of us was mad. This was not mad. This was a difference of opinion. And it took us all of 3 minutes max to have our disagreement, to say our words, to be respectful of one another, and to completely cease fighting anything or anybody. And it says, even alcohol, but I'm going to say, because I got goosebumps right now from head to toe. We cease fighting anything and anybody, especially those we love. All right? I stuck to my guns because of AA traditions, because when our responsibility declaration says the hand of AA, right? And my sponsor's very good at this. The hand of AA is at the end of my arm, and it's not only a good thing, but it's also my responsibility. And Bill Wilson uses the phrase "stick flat-footed." To stick flat-footed on Alcoholics Anonymous being Alcoholics Anonymous. And so this whole interaction, really, I'm going to say maximum 4, but I'm going to tell you, it was a long 3 minutes. And my knees wanted to buckle. I get very, very excited. And then so you go, I love this again, because inventory is such a beautiful thing. When the big book says, alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in how, right? With the baseball bat? No. In the simple way we have just outlined. Well, where's that? What do you mean, simple way, an outline? What is that? Well, that's all the directions from page 84 to 88. It's a simple outline for daily living, moment by moment disturbance when they crop up, right? In step 10, it's an immediate thing, and so I live in the immediate. Even though it was a long 4 minutes, we both recovered from that to the degree where he said, "I love you, Biddy," and I said, "I love you too. I love you too." And wasn't that difficult? We kind of laughed at ourselves about how difficult that conversation just was, but how AA saves the day every time. And a brief discussion about rights, tradition for those kind of things, and responsibility. And today in AA, my responsibilities far outweigh my rights. I don't even have rights. just check them at the door, right? Check them at the door. I learned what did the lady tell me one time? She says, Biddy, you have a right to take it easy, right? But you have a responsibility to make it easy to take. And this changes my whole trajectory of the day. And that takes me right back to this idea of when I retire at night, I constructively review the day. Have you ever been coached? My husband's a coach. He coaches football, baseball, volleyball, golf. He coaches golf. When you're coaching kids especially, you need to tell them what they're doing wrong. You can't just, right? You need to direct, okay, well, God is kind of like that. And so in that evening review, we let God discipline us the simple way we've just outlined, right? And then there's the promises of step 11. We are then, right, after the fact, not before, we are then in much less danger of what? Excitement. These are in order. For me, these are in order because I'm easily excited. I'm like, oh, look, a puppy, right? I'm easily excited. We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, and foolish decisions. That right there is an inventory list for me. Biddy, today, how excited, right? Because I will make way worse decisions when I am excited and happy than I am when I am sad or mad. Because when I'm sad or mad, I'm way more likely to go to God, like right then. But when I'm excited and I'm full of personal ambition, coupled with adrenaline, I turn into that character that Jim Carrey plays. Wasn't that the Joker? Try and stop me, right? Well, fortunately, I suffer from this illness known as alcoholism, and it keeps, well, I hope this isn't too graphic, but it does have a tendency to keep a loaded gun to the back of my head saying, hey, you better do it this way over here. And that's not God threatening me. That's John Barleycorn. And so I kind of want to tell you that I'm loaded with virtue. I'm not. Anything that I have comes from that beauty of the difficulty. And so what we were talking about before the meeting a little bit was this idea that, I'm a recovered alcoholic. My life is pretty darn smooth. I'm married to a fabulous godly man. I don't know if you know this or not, but I've got a great dog named Fidget. All right. He's a wonderful dog. I have a really strong, pretty strong 3 legacy home group. My life is good. My health is good. I have all of these things that the home group relationships. What happened last night offers me currently, honestly, about the only spiritual challenge I have in my life is AA. This is why continuing. This is the beauty right here. Is sobriety all we are to expect of a spiritual awakening? And, I would change it because, I like to change everything to the way I want it. And I would, instead of saying no, comma, mine would be all caps, no, 3 exclamation marks, and then the next sentence. Sobriety is only the bare beginning. If this is to go on, if more gifts are to be received, our awakening must go on. And so with the way I'm viewing my inventory and the way I view spiritual growth is nothing ever happens for me in the absence of discomfort. So this is why column 2 becomes a gratitude list, because column 2 is the one that shakes me up a little. Something happens to disturb me. Our literature is so clear, and it helps so much to really turn the eyeglasses around, turn the lens around. I was like this for the whole world, and it turned it around, and all of a sudden, or always the other way, and my problems come from me. And in the 12 and 12, I think it's in the step 7 essay. The directions for the steps are in the book, clear cut and precise. Those essays, though, in the 12 and 12 have some beautiful verbiage. And it said something like, it turns out that this is the price of admission to a meaningful life. Discomfort is always the price of admission to a meaningful life. And all my life I had swept aside anything that was uncomfortable, and you'll see it on t-shirts, good vibes only, things like that. For me, that's a recipe for suicide. Another drink. I cannot live my life that way. And so I continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And I love that it says when they crop up. Not if. I had a friend of mine, Brian with a Y. He posed a question once. It wasn't to me, but when I hear something that sparks my interest or touches a nerve, or, you have these little epiphanies, and he mentioned something like, if I'm taking step 10 as an occasional response to an episode, like an episodic response, rather than as a way of living, then I'm missing the point of step 10. I don't like set my alarm and say, okay, today at 1 o'clock, I'm going to do a step 10. Any more than if maybe I have diabetes, right? And the insulin pump tells me, you need insulin. You need it like right now. I'm not going to wait till 2 p.m. Oh, hang on a minute. I've got my step 10 isn't until 2 o'clock. No, that warning administers the insulin in the moment of the episode. And so step 10 and 11, they're almost like I lay them over the top of one another. It's not linear anymore. The steps, in fact, have lost their numbers, because if you look at step 10, it's 4 through 9 every day. This is a way of life. We have a design for living, right? And a way of life, the elements of which answer all my problems. All of them. Doesn't mean life stops. How many times have we heard, and I've said it, maybe you've said it, I just want these feelings to go away. I just want them to go away. Then my friend said, well, then, Biddy, you have the goals of a dead person, because only dead people never feel bad. So discomfort is what wakes me out of my slumber. And I can tell you my first 4-step, way back in the day, awakened me. And I did not wake up happy, but I did in fact wake up. And so I heard a pretty good speaker, his name's Herb, somebody or other, I can't remember. And he said, the thing about a spiritual awakening is this, the lights are on. He says there's good news, right? The good news is the lights are on. Look at our verbiage in the book. A wonderful light shines on the foggy scene. We have that imagery. We have, what does it say in step 5? You shine the light on every dark nook and cranny, right, of your life. And so the good news is the lights are on. Pooh, I came awake and alive. But the bad news is that the lights are on. And that I wasn't prepared for. And that's good, because here's what they told me. If you wait till you're ready, you'll never do it. I am made ready by the doing of the thing I am not ready to do, just like life. Because I'd always get caught maybe with my spiritual pants down, or and it takes a while to be able to recover. I'll use the little thing we had last night with my friend. And he is my friend. I am all the way in love with this guy and his wife. They are solid AA, new, but solid. And we are working as a team. And so, I don't know where I was going with that. I lost it. I completely lost it. I hate when that happens. So this, we are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, foolish decisions, and in that order. So, for my spiritual awakening to go on, I must continue in these daily disciplines. And my first 4-step, I did wake up, but I did not wake up happy. There was a lot of stuff, right? This is the beauty of the step 4 prayer. Not to be confused. I know there's a prayer in the back of the book that says when you have a resentment, you should pray for that person. That's fine. Okay. But that style of prayer has never treated my alcoholism. I need the step 4 prayer. I need the one that's right in our steps. And, it's kind of trickery because, I have to ask myself if the clear-cut, precise directions of how to take the steps are located in the first 164 pages of our literature, the big book, then a prayer located outside of that 164 wouldn't be part of our steps, would it? It would not. And it's beautiful. And this is one of those places that Bill talks about in his writing. And I don't know where he got it. I think he may have gotten it either from Shoemaker or Ed Dowling. It's a perfect example of where good is the enemy of the best. Because I'm mastering resentment in step 4 with the beautiful prayer of they like ourselves. They like ourselves. You put opposite each name your injury, right? Maybe my injury was in my head, and here's the beautiful part of our inventory because it says real or fancied. Because I get hung up on well, no, it really happened, blah, blah, blah. Okay, good. Good. This is a necessary Bob D out of Las Vegas. He's the first time I heard anybody say this. And it was my experience 100%. It's a necessary indulgence into victimization so that I can get free of that. And so that's the beauty of that step 4 prayer located. Okay. It's location on page 67. So my resentment inventory is 3 columns and a prayer. Without that prayer, I can't get to what my mistake is. And that, because that's what it says. It says putting out of our minds the wrongs others have done. I'm supposed to put that out of my mind. I couldn't because it was still so deeply embedded in my heart. And what had happened in my life prior to AA was that I lived from about my Adam's apple up. Very intellectual, very cerebral. Okay. And I ran from any discomfort that was, discomfort. You know what discomfort is for me? It might be different for you. Discomfort is God's opportunity. It's God calling. Hey, come over here. Right? To direct my thinking. We have a fear prayer. We have a resentment prayer, right? And that prayer is God save me from being angry. We realize that the people that harmed us, even if it's make-believe, let's go there. Where perhaps maybe that person is suffering from an illness. The same as you, and I've rephrased that prayer an awful lot in my life. At first, like everybody else, I called it the sick man prayer, and I realized later on that prayer is not about the sick man, unless it's the man in the mirror. That prayer is not about the other person. That today, and then I began to call it something else for a little. I have it all written in my book, but it's up there closed. I have Language of the Heart open, by the way. The letter is on page 233 of Language of the Heart. And I do it again. I lose my train of thought when I do that. Yeah, it's gone. It happens a lot. Happens more at 64 years old than it does, right? So, that's a shame. I can assure you it was brilliant, whatever it was I was going to say. It was brilliant. So let's focus on the word danger in the 11-step promise, where it says, I'm in much less danger of excitement. Excitement's the number one dangerous thing for me. Whether that excitement comes from, the acquisition of my new puppy or whatever it is. Excitement of that nature will cause me to derail and I'll leave the will of God. And so this discomfort is God's direction for me. And when I inquire in the end of my evening review, what corrective measures should be taken, this is where I grow. And the next day when I wake up, I'm not awakening in any kind of untreated alcoholism. I don't, it doesn't like click back on because I go to sleep with my Creator. In the will of God, there's no safer place to be than in the will of God. That doesn't equal comfort. And so we go, again, back to the literature where it says to stay on the firing line. Stay on the firing line of life with these motives, and God will keep you unharmed. Oh, so I can live in this world unharmed. Unharmed is not, and again, all of my definitions have changed. Unharmed is not synonymous with comfortable. It just means unharmed. I can have a lot of stuff go down today that does not harm me, because if my problems come from me, then the only thing that comes at me is opportunity. I had a talk with my sponsor a couple days ago, and I was about to tell her I'd had a couple of really hard days, really bad. I was going to say bad days. And I just stopped kind of like right there in my tracks. And I said, no, what I've had is a day packed with opportunity for spiritual growth. Those are all opportunity. When I look at circumstances through the victim lens, this beauty, this prayer at 67, started out calling it the prayer, started out calling it the prayer of compassion, which is beautiful, right? Then I realized that's a prayer of hypocrisy. That's where I'm the hypocrite. And those little words, I called it the prayer of empathy. They, like ourselves. Here's what happens in this prayer. I'm allowed to not like your symptoms. So we realized the people that had harmed us were, perhaps, how soft and beautiful is that? We're just offering this for your consideration, Biddy, that the people that had harmed you were perhaps spiritually ill. And I love this next line. Though I didn't like the symptoms. I don't like your symptoms. Okay, I'm allowed to not like your symptoms. And I don't like the way your symptoms disturb me. But you, just like me, were sick too. T-O-O. That means this is not a sick man prayer. This is a just like me prayer. That's what I call it today. So it's gone through. First it was the prayer of compassion. Beautiful. Still works. Won't undo that one. The only one I take off the list is the sick man prayer, because that's still outward focused. Right? I'm still the victim when I think that's the sick man prayer. Just pray for that sick, that's not what this says. It says, how can I show him the same kindly, right? Tolerance, pity. Pity in this context means compassion for another's suffering. Compassion is what dissolves resentment. I was set free from resentment long before I got to column 4, long before I got to step 9 or 8 or 7. I was free. I wasn't out, but I was free. I could see the world through a completely different lens, and that's when I said, I'm such a hypocrite. The very thing that I've been pointing at you, I have, all right? And when I'm seeing the world through a sheet of red glass, it colors everything after that. Everything, even the good, right? We have things called rose-colored glasses. I had that on, but mine were more like a crap-colored glasses. I couldn't see through my own stuff, and so they told me in AA, Biddy, you don't see the world as the world is. You see the world as you are. So when the lens became clean, I did not clean the lens. God did that. And there's a place in Bill's story where he says the scales fell from his eyes. The scales of pride, prejudice, all of that. And suddenly joined the human race where nobody was greater than, nobody was less than. There was only all of us, humans, and God. Children of a living creator. In varying degrees of development, varying degrees of awareness. This idea that God shows up, to me, has become, I don't want to be insulting. Well, for me, it's nonsense. God never showed up for me. I awakened to an already present God that had been there all along, that I had not wanted anything to do with. Why? Because I want life handed to me on a silver platter. And God had been doing that all along in my life. I showed up about 28 years old here. I got sober. I had 2 sobriety dates, but only one of them matters, which is the most recent one. But I had these epiphanies very early on in my first part. And God had been offering me life on a silver platter. None of it suited me. Boom. I'd slap the tray out of his hand. I don't want that. I want this over here. I don't want that. I want this over here. I want monster was really, really, and so that's what they told me personal ambition is. Because I didn't know what personal ambition is. I thought it was ambitious. No, I was driven by fear. And today, this is a continuing education program. If this is going to continue, and so my home group is the most difficult part of my life, and as the result of that, I am offered so much more opportunity for growth, right? Because discomfort is the price of admission. There is, I can do, this is fear inventory. For me, it's all going to boil down to fear inventory. And when I'm in fear, how do I behave? I think that little 3-minute exchange is indicative of 2 people who are firmly embedded in their step work. Because just because I don't like your symptom doesn't mean that I don't like you. And I couldn't separate it out. It's the symptom that's disturbing me. And it disturbs me because God is what? Asking me for teaching me in that moment how to love without condition. And treat people with respect, whether you disagree, agree, whatever. This is how we show up in the planet today. And I'm just going to tell you, we both passed that test. And then we laughed about it a few minutes later because I told him, man, my knees were buckling. That was really, really hard. He goes, I know, me too. That was, basically it was like emotional isometrics there for a minute. He goes, I don't know about you, but I had to pray like right then. I'm going, yeah, me too. But he's my brother in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he's on fire. And if I live long enough, I'd like to see him at about 70 years old with the amount of practice he's still doing. I'd love to see that. But I won't live that long because he's a young man. So I'm going to refer to another page in that same letter. Got about a minute left. Focusing on this idea that discomfort is the price of admission. And Bill goes on in this letter, and he says these words. I learned that money was no longer a symbol of prestige. It was just, and he said, they also showed me that the temptations of riches could be worse than the pains of poverty. Here's my takeaway sentence. I also found, and now it's in italics, that there is no such thing as an unfortunate AA. Then he says, that is, and this is brutal, if he's a real member. What does that mean? What's a real member of Alcoholics Anonymous? Well, it's right there. He says if sick, he was by fine example and inspiration to those both sick and well. If poor in pocket, he would be rich in spirit and an eager worker and servant of our society. So then he says, I now see that awakening and growing is something that never needs stop, and that growing pains are never to be feared, provided I'm willing to see the truth of myself from them. And then back on page 91, 20 seconds to go. When fear persisted, this is a beautiful line. When fear, not if, when, we knew it for what it was, and we became able to handle it. We began to see that each adversity is a God-given opportunity to develop the kind of courage born of humility rather than bravado. So the attainment of greater humility is the foundation principle of all of our steps, and I will never outgrow Alcoholics Anonymous or the need for more humility. Thank you so much, Sheffield Group, for having me here today. Again, I'm in love with Alcoholics Anonymous, which makes me, I'm in love with you. And that's not creepy stalker love. That's not subject object. It's like being in a car. I am in love. Love is a place at the same time with you. So thanks for allowing me to participate today.